Coastal guards were unaware that this odd blue boat would soon become the focal point of a nightmare scenario. When they intercepted it, none of their radars picked up the blue metallic vessel. Furthermore, there was little they could do to halt what happened when they entered the ship. About 3 miles off the coast, during a normal inspection, the blue floating ship was noticed. The crew nearly passed it at first. It appeared to be a speck on the horizon. But then, one of the 7 coastal guards pointed and said, "Guys, there's something in the water over there." The squad soon realized that the floating craft was far larger than they had first believed. As their own boat approached, their ship's radar did not seem to pick up the boat at all. It was a mystery boat. The captain of the crew looked at the monitor once more, but for some reason it only showed their own ship. Its blue hue, which nearly merged perfectly with the waves of the water, further enhanced this sensation. It made sense for the crew to call out to the person operating the enigmatic boat, in order to learn more. "Hey, this is the Coastal Guard. Is the individual inside the blue ship going to come out and say hello?" However, despite their repeated pleas, no one appeared to respond. There was a sense of tension in the air, and only by looking more closely could it be resolved. In order to bring the blue boat in, the team immediately threw a rope with a hook at the end toward it. However, that also did not exactly proceed as planned. Since the boat didn't appear to be very big, they should have been able to bring it close with a full crew of powerful men pulling. However, the enigmatic object refused to move. Instead, they were dragged forward in their own boat. "What is this thing?" The captain's voice was trembling. "This item is more complicated than it first appears." As their 2 ships eventually made contact, one of the crew members said, "We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg." However, the captain ordered him and a colleague to lead the inquiry. This crew member would later come to regret saying this. The Coastal Guard assigned to the search, Brendan, was apprehensive, but he couldn't let his people down while they were watching. He carefully crept toward the tiny top windows, setting his first few steps on top of the blue boat. John, his partner and a member of his crew, joined him, and they attempted to look inside. The view via the little windows, however, seemed nearly black, offering little insight. Their only option was to do one thing. "We must open her up," Brendan told his pal. John concurred, and they raised the ship's hatch together. The boat's top hatch opened with a loud creak, revealing a staircase below. The fact that they couldn't see the bottom made them much more anxious. In the hopes that their captain would call them back, the 2 men gazed at him. However, the elderly sailor only encouraged them. "We're right here, so go ahead." Brendan retrieved a flashlight from his back pocket and used it to light up the area below. The 2 men would later come to bitterly regret their decision to dive down into the boat. When they reached the bottom, John and Brendan looked around with the flashlight. The interior of the ship appeared much more dilapidated than expected. "Who was the boat's pilot? Because no one is here," John said, perplexed. With the exception of the central console, which looked to have seen better days, everything seemed to be nothing but bare metal. With a shrug, Brendan attempted to share his discoveries with the outside team. Words were difficult to comprehend over Brendan's shaky walkie-talkie connection. However, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Above the 2 men there was a creak, and then the top hatch abruptly closed by itself. When the captain and other crew members of the coastal boat noticed this, there was widespread fear. They attempted to inquire about Brendan and John's well-being, but the closed hatch entirely cut off the contact signal. The 2 members of the investigation crew were separated from the rest of the group, and that was only the beginning of their trouble, because right after that the boat began to vibrate intensely. John and Brendan ascended the ladder and gazed fearfully at their coastal vessel. What on earth is happening? Unfortunately, the blue boat had a mind of its own and was beginning to entirely descend beneath the ocean's surface. This would be their last chance to see the outside world. Despite his internalized panic, Brendan tried his hardest to calm his colleague down. "John, calm down. We are not sinking because the boat is not absorbing water." However, this purposeful comment did little to reassure John. Who is doing this if it's deliberate? Brendan tried to maintain his composure for as long as he could, but soon both men fell into a panic. They banged their fists against the ladder's metal hatch, but it would not budge. This was ineffective. A few seconds later, the boat was fully underwater. Then a realization hit Brendan's brain. This isn't just any boat, it is a submarine of sorts. John nodded in agreement, but that did not solve their dire situation. The two crew members desperately tried to communicate with the main boat, but the signal was completely dead. Brendan's mind returned to the time they had initially found that odd blue ship. Why, though, was this boat so stealthy? It was highly concealed by its blue color and filtered off all communication, making it invisible on the radar. What was it used for? The submarine was heading to an unidentified site with serious repercussions. The two terrified coastal guards would soon learn of it. However, John and Brendan had nothing to do except wait. Until then, they took advantage of the time to look for potential hints inside the submarine. The main console on the sub's north side was the first area they inspected. "Over here is a door," John called out. Brendan turned around and looked at his companion. In their panic, they had completely forgotten about this section of the submarine. John was standing on the opposite side, gesturing toward a large entryway with a big metal handle attached. What might be behind this? Hoping their combined strength would be enough, they began pushing the handle downward. However, just like the hatch above, the door refused to budge. Just as Brendan and John slumped down in defeat, the submarine started vibrating again. It was the same sensation from earlier, but this time, they were clearly rising. "There's light coming through the top window," John exclaimed excitedly. However, Brendan quickly brushed aside his excitement. Something was off. Loud sounds came from above the submarine as it surfaced. "Someone is approaching. Run for cover," Brendan warned. The two men jumped up and hid behind the console. A moment later, the hatch on top opened. 3 individuals climbed down and made their way to the locked door. Brendan cautiously peered over the corner and watched as they accessed the sealed compartment without a single tool. However, when they emerged, they were carrying heavy items. What was this location? What were they removing? As Brendan tried to make sense of everything, his mind raced. The men, large and heavy-set, carried dozens of hefty packages to the surface. They ascended and descended multiple times, each time bringing more cargo. Brendan and John were fortunate not to get caught, but that didn't mean they were safe. Inside the submarine, silence returned. John and Brendan glanced at each other. The people had left the ship's upper section open. They understood this was their only chance to escape. Without hesitation, they climbed the ladder. As they emerged, they were immediately taken aback by their surroundings. There was no land in sight. Above them loomed a massive oil rig platform, supported by 4 enormous floating pillars. "Where the hell have we ended up?" John's voice trembled.